because I was stuck in traffic there. So
Okay.
I just wanted to get a heads up. So thank you. Now we'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Selby.
Okay. Tonight, I'm happy to introduce the proposed balanced budget for fiscal year 15-16 for the Council's discussion and consideration. As with our previous budget items, this material has been made available to the public. It was part of the agenda package that was on the website last Friday. This year's budget continues with past efforts to keep the city's operational costs as low as we can while still providing important services and programs. Departments came into the budget process with nominal requests, mostly for equipment, vehicles, operating supplies, and services. All of the department requests, in my opinion, were very legitimate and justifiable, but many of them were cut because we just couldn't afford all of them. And the departments were readily amenable to working in the interest of achieving a balanced budget to make those cuts. I think what's happening, too, is we're seeing the benefits of a lot of years of hard work by the council and the staff as the budget process is starting to get a little bit easier. It's still a challenge to balance it, but we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Some of this is just a result of better labor contracts, which the council has approved. We're seeing some stabilization in pension costs. We're seeing staff refreshment. I call it that. It's the turnover where older employees are leaving and younger ones are coming in under the new wage scales and new pension plans. We've found and captured more efficiencies as we've implemented different procedures within the city. So all of those things are coming together to help us. And in fact, this year's general fund budget expenditures are down over $300,000 from last year. So I want to thank all the city departments at this point for their contributions to this budget. We're not done yet. There's more input to be received on the budget. There's more deliberation and discussion. This is, a budget presented for the council to consider, to add, delete, modify, and over the next few weeks, refine it till the point we're ready for a public hearing on May 28th. So with that, Laura will present some of the highlights of the budget, and we'll be here to answer any questions.
Okay. We wanted to start off just by going over some of the highlights that are in the budget, and then we'll go through changes from the draft that was not a proposal, but just an accumulation of what the department heads had requested and our revenue estimates. The general fund budget is approximately $34 million. The original gap in the draft was just under $800,000. This budget is a balance without the use of fund balance, and it's in general compliance with the 5-year plan. There's no pension amortization proposed, and it is in compliance with the state tax cap. A couple items of note that are the same as the draft, but still are items that we wanted to point out, was that the part-time secretary and the mayor and council is now budgeted as full-time. There's a cell phone stipend included for each member of council in that budget as well. Buildings, well, we haven't adjusted the budget yet. We have heard that the head custodian may be retiring. If that's the case, we would like to consider changing that from a head custodian and multiple part-time custodians to 2 full-time custodians, which would have a savings somewhere between $2,000 to, depending on where they came in on the salary schedule, $2,000 to $30-some thousand worth of savings. Sales tax, this is the one major deviation from the financial plan. It's budgeted higher, but still estimated to be conservative. We did a bunch of research on what the state was using as estimates, and those estimates percent increases are lower than what we've seen this year so far. So we think that while we don't have a number that's way under budget, we believe it is conservative and should be really close to what we actually bring in next year. The sewer fund ROI and admin is slightly decreased, and this is due to both a decrease in the budget and the revenue estimates. So now I'll get into some of the changes from the draft that was presented on April 9th. In the city clerk's budget, the vacant part-time clerk position was removed. The civil service commissioner salaries were removed. In engineering, there was a decrease of services and consulting fees amounting to almost $7,000. Central services had some changes. Basically, we had some additional costs that were brought up after the original draft. And to offset these, we decreased some of the office equipment we planned on purchasing and also decreased services. Our insurance costs, it looks like a really large decrease in general fund, and it is, but you'll see in other funds when the allocation was received between the buildings and the functions, you will see some other funds where the insurance has increased, which offsets so the total bill for the city isn't really going down much, but the general fund pieces. We decreased unallocated salaries by $5,000, decreased the contingency by $25,000. In the police department, the police chief had requested 4 new positions for approximately $320,000. Those were not put into this budget. He also requested 4 cars, and in this budget, there's only 3 cars included, a $32,000 savings. There's also a reduction of $50,000, which we asked him to figure out how he wanted to allocate that reduction, and you can see the different items that he used to make that happen. Furniture and fixtures, office equipment, other equipment, operating supplies, and consulting fees. Like in the police department, in the fire department, we also asked the chief to make a reduction of $50,000, and he did this through various different accounts. We also removed the admin vehicle of $30,000 from the budget. In code enforcements, we reduced the 2 requested demolitions down to 1 requested demolition for a savings of $50,000. In Public Works Administration.
Or could you back up just
Sure.
1 second? I'm not sure the terminology. Help me out. Reduce 2 demolitions to 1. I was under the impression that the $50,000 was in, I want to say, a bank, and they would play away from that. Are you saying here that 2 demolitions are $25,000 a piece, or I'm unclear?
No, demolitions are approximately $50,000 a piece. They had originally had $100,000 in the budget,
Okay.
and it's reduced down to $50,000.
Okay, thank you.
Snow removal, due to the excessively bad winter we had, we're hoping that that's an anomaly and reduce the snow removal budget down to what it was last year. The Parks Department was reduced by about $25,000 through operating supply services and other equipment. Casey Park, we had a decrease in temporary and part-time, a decrease in electric, and a decrease in services. Some of this is due to the agreement with the hockey boosters, and some of these expenses will be taken care of by that organization. Special events was decreased by $16,000. Senior programs, the part-time employees were removed for a savings of $66,000. AMPA, the budget was eliminated. That was approximately $2,500. The reason that was eliminated was the only items in there were secretarial services, and the person that does the work actually uses comp time. So there's no cost over the last couple of years because she earns her comp time and then she uses it, which is a great savings to the city. The unemployment insurance has been reduced by $25,000, and debt service was increased by approximately $419,000. This debt service increase is due to We didn't receive as much in grant reimbursements as we had expected the first year, so the bonds that we were carrying weren't reduced as much, and therefore the principal and interest payments are higher next year. Transfers to other funds were decreased by $18,000. This was just a recalculation of the estimate. We're proposing to change the garage to all one rate and to increase the rate just slightly to $50 per month. The reason that we think the garage should be all one rate is because there's no enforcement, so people can buy a rooftop pass and park anywhere they'd like. And the rooftop passes are significantly cheaper than the undercover passes. Casey Park revenue is been decreased by approximately $68,000 for ice time. This again is due to the hockey boosters agreement. The CHIPS allocation is decreased by $100,000. That's being moved to capital fund to increase the road program. There is an increased transfer from capital of $250,000. Interest income has been decreased by approximately $25,000 just to be more in line with what we've been seeing this year. So moving on to the solid waste fund, we have a projected loss of approximately $340,000. That is a actual loss and takes away any non-cash items. While we still have a loss, this loss is significantly less than our debt service. So at this point, it does make sense to continue with operations. We've reduced liability insurance in this fund by $29,000. We've reduced fuel a bit. We had adjustments in personnel due to some movement from retirements and whatnot that generated $15,000 in savings in methane gas utilities, and reevaluated the closure and post-closure accruals based on our tonnage and reduced those by $150,000. In the refuse collection fund, we have a decrease in salaries of approximately $27,000. This again is due to some of that movement we've seen from retirements. We have an increase in workers' compensation of $15,000, a decrease in operating supplies of approximately $3,000, and a decrease in vehicle maintenance and repairs. There's no proposed rate increases in this fund. In the power utility fund, we're seeing a projected loss of approximately $147,000. We've decreased the liability insurance slightly, adjusted the hydro salaries upwards because one of the movement items that I was speaking about was an employee from another fund took the 50% water, 50% hydro position that was authorized a couple months ago, and this is a top step person. So we were originally budgeting a starting salary, but we had to adjust that because that person is top step. We added the Siemens contract that was originally left out of the draft. That contract is a performance contract so that they're monitoring our new hydro facility, the Mill Street Dam. And we increased general fund support by $47,000, so this fund is break even. The water fund is balanced without rate increases. We had to increase the liability insurance in this fund a little bit. We increased judgments and settlements because we've seen a few of those this year, and we'd like to actually make sure those are budgeted for. We adjusted the revenue estimates upward slightly. They're somewhere between last year's actual and last year's budget. And we've adjusted the fees for the Vector rental and frozen pipes based on a recommendation from our water and sewer supervisor, who believes that these costs, the fees aren't covering the cost. And finally, the sewer fund. This is also balanced without rate increases. We had to increase the liability insurance in this fund significantly, and we also adjusted revenue estimates slightly.
Laura, why the increase in liability insurance in both, I think it was water and sewer?
like I was saying before, the overall bill to the city wasn't increased, but the actual cost to the funds, some increase and some decrease, just based on the actual buildings that are in those funds. So it was just a kind of a realignment of where the expense really should be.
Could I back you up one screen?
Yep.
Adjust fees for Vector rental and frozen pipes. How much is that?
We don't have estimates yet. We think it'll be relatively minimal because those
What are you proposing for the budget, though?
the increases aren't in there because we weren't sure exactly how much how much more it would cost. So we'll get, that's one of the items that's still open. We will get that information to you.
When can we have it? Because this is supposed to be a preliminary budget. Everything should be in here as of now so that we can make our adjustments accordingly. So are we going to get them this week? I'd like to have them before,
Yes.
at least before the end of the week, so I can make my adjustments because we're meeting Tuesday next week.
Okay. The actual fee estimates are in the fee schedule that was sent out.
But I'm saying, what are you proposing in this one area here? That's my question. And can I back you up a couple more screens? Are you done, or are you still going forward? I don't want to interrupt you if you...
I'm ready for questions.
Oh, you are? Okay. Let's go back to the debt service, the increase by $419,000. I think it was like the second or third page in.
Yeah.
Explain that to us, please.
The original debt service estimate was that the locally administered federal aid projects would have reimbursement coming back to them. And while they did have some reimbursement, the reimbursement was less than the full amount. Because the bond that we're carrying, because that reimbursement isn't paying off the bond yet, the debt service is higher.
Reimbursement, what bond are you talking about, though? Do you have a specific area?
Yep, it's Walnut Street Culvert, traffic signals, and South Street.
And how come we didn't get as much as we set out to get?
We will get it, it just hasn't come back yet. So because the projects
Are you having revenue to offset this? Is that what you're going to be doing?
No.
So it's going to be accrual is what it would be.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
You said that the money's going to be coming in.
Yes, the money will be coming into the capital fund as a reimbursement to the project. And at that point, we will pay off the debt. But because of the way the debt rules work, we have to pay a certain amount based on how much we have outstanding at the time. So because we haven't gotten that reimbursement to pay it back yet, the amount that we have to pay back is higher.
Amount that's got to be paid back is going to be higher.
Right, because if you think about the debt service on a $2 million bond versus a $200,000 bond, the $2 million bond has larger debt service. So because we haven't received that reimbursement, the bond amount or the ban amount is higher. Sorry, I'm seeing blank faces. I don't think I'm explaining it correctly.
Maybe you can give us a memo on that so I can see it, if you would, if you can explain a little better and get it out to council for us.
Okay.
And be specific in the areas that you're talking about, please.
Can I try?
Councilor Zarabi?
You can try.
I just, based on what the comptroller said, is that the money, we haven't received the money from the grant. It's on its way, but for the time being, we have to pay the debt service because it's required by law, but we will eventually be getting that money.
But it's not going to reimburse us 100%, is what she's saying.
Eventually, it will. We will get the full amount.
We're going to get the full amount. Yes, we'll get what we were promised, but we have to pay more up front than we.
Are we going to get the amount that we're paying out? That's. I guess that's the question.
We'll be getting 95% reimbursement for the project. Yes.
So 5% is what you're setting aside here.
No.
Can I clarify? we're getting 100% of what was promised to us, correct?
Yes,
Yes.
which is 95% of the
Which is
project.
95%. So I just don't want, the 95% seems confusing. We're getting all the money, but we have to pay up front. Is that what you're saying?
Can you give me the numbers on that so I can see it when you get a chance, please?
Yeah, I don't want to muddy the waters anymore, but in my mind, at the very end, we're not in a negative position. We're being reimbursed for everything, just we're paying more up front to get to that position. Like I said, I don't want to muddy the waters anymore, but it's making perfect sense here.
That's the basics of it, yes.
But you're budgeting $419,000 for this year here.
Yes.
And when are we going to get reimbursed for that $419,000? We won't get reimbursed for all of it.
I'm going to send a memo because you're confusing yourself, I think.
I think
If I show you an illustration, it might be easier
if
then.
you put the numbers down, I can see
Yeah.
it correct.
Laura, would you make sure we all receive it?
Sure.
Yes.
Please.
Yep.
Other questions, council? Thank you, Laura. Back to you.
Well, this was the introduction, and as I said, over the next few weeks, we'd like to refine it based on council's input, public input, and we'll continue to look at it ourselves as we see new forecasts and expenditures and revenues, but I think it's mostly a matter of making adjustments here and there, keeping it balanced.
Council.
Can I just say to the city manager, thank you for coming back to the council with a balanced budget. And on my preliminary review of it, I will be coming back next week with some modifications and suggestions. But I do want to say that because you really have done a great amount of work in taking $768,000 from the last draft that this council has seen. I obviously I wish some of my suggestions last week were considered, but I really appreciate the amount of work that went into this, and lots of cuts were made. So I just don't want it to seem like that hasn't been acknowledged. So, but again, there's still time for us to perhaps modify it. So thank you.
Council.
I guess I got to say I'm disappointed because I see that there's almost a 2% increase of property taxes to the taxpayers of this community. I've been talking for a year now to look at reorganization in government because it's something that needs to happen. And I'm glad that you heard from the manager tonight. It was the work of previous councils, at least for the first 2 years, that we brought substantial reductions in the overall budget to the taxpayers of this community. So we're seeing some of that, the fruits of those efforts. But once again, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that we have increase of almost $450,000 in sales tax revenue this year that's not being applied to. Last year, the majority of council opted to borrow from our pension fund. I thought some of that money could be used to pay down that pension fund. We still have that debt to New York State pension that was borrowed against last year's budget. I thought that some of that $450,000 in new revenue coming into the city could have been used to offset that. But it's disappointing, especially when I see new spending. It's not the mayor's secretary, but it's the secretary of the members of council and the mayor. Right now, that position's a part-time position. I think it's working very well. I know that the members of the clerk's office, the two individuals at the clerk office, have been doing an excellent job when that office hasn't been open to help people. They've helped me many a times. I thank them very much for their work. But these are the things that we need to do when we're looking to make adjustments in the spending of the city to make sure that these increases don't keep coming back to the taxpayers. We're increasing that position to a full-time position right now, which is looked at in the budget, and we're not filling police officers that we need desperately. So next week I will be addressing all these things. I'll make sure I bring a balanced budget to the members of the council and to the general public with not property tax increases, and especially not all the fees that we're looking at raising, not we, but that the manager's projecting. So I think there's much work to be done, a lot of work to be done, because we need to start looking at these things, because as years start to move forward, these increases keep multiplying. Just as I hear it repeatedly, oh, it's only 2% increase in taxes. Let's take the last 10 years and look at how many increases have been over the last 10 years. We'll just take an average of 2%. That's 20% more in property taxes that the people of the city are paying. Not only city, county, whatever the case may be. That's a large amount of money. I don't think anybody's income is growing to 20% over a 10-year period. So we need to start looking seriously, as I've been talking about, week after week, to reorganize government, to make sure we're providing efficiencies. The cost of government is being brought down while we're still providing essential services to the taxpayers, but the burden can't keep being put on the taxpayers of this area. It's something that's a very serious issue that we need to look at. We need to make sure that we keep in mind that we're not overburdening the taxpayers so that people are putting their houses up for sale and just leaving the area because they can't afford any more new taxes. I know that. I feel the pain out there. My wife and I have a difficult time putting our yearly budgets together. We have children in college. It's a very difficult situation. So I know that. I know what's going on firsthand out there. So with that said, next week or Tuesday, I believe, I will be providing council and the general public a detailed budget draft, the way I want to look at making modifications to the budget. So thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Selby, once again, I'll try to go back to you. If you have anything
No,
else.
nothing else,
It's your
Mayor.
show this evening, so.